Hey there, welcome to Hobie on YouTube. Let's take a look at a Swiss Champ. Talk about those a little bit. And I do have a beautiful one here. This one's in factory hardwood scales, so we'll take a look at that in a second. But this is a model that Victorinox introduced in 1985, although it was preceded by the Champion. So Champion goes way back. I can't quite remember when they started with the Champion, but some of the older ones, have the long nail file. So that's pretty old. But there was the Champion A, that was the model with the corkscrew, and then there was the Champion B that had a Phillips driver instead of the corkscrew. And then in the 70s, that was a 6-layer knife. And in the 70s, they introduced a 7th layer and put in the inline Phillips and the magnifying glass in that, and that became the Champion C, or kind of grew into the Champion Plus. And I believe Victorinox made that and offered it up until about 2017. So for a long time you could get, the Swiss Champ or the Champion Plus. And the difference is the Swiss Champ has an 8th layer, which is the pliers. And it also has the hook on the back. So we'll take a look at all of that. That's just kind of a rundown on the history of the Swiss Champ. And today they sell the Swiss Champ, and they also sell the Swiss Champ XXL and the XLT. And while this one is 8 layers, although it only counts 7 spring layers, but it does have 8 layers of tools, it could still possibly fit in a pocket, maybe even like a back pocket or something. But the XXL and the XLT are 15-layer knives, so they're just kind of like Victorinox's entire toolbox. And while you could throw those in a backpack or a glove compartment or something, you would never carry those. They're really just kind of for show, to show off all the different tools. And they cost a lot too. Those cost over $300. You can get a Swiss Champ, in the regular Celador scales. They retail for, I think, about $107. And the ones with Victorinox's current wood scales, which are a little different than these, retail for like $144. So they're not cheap knives. This one has the older discontinued Bubinga or rosewood. I'm not sure. It looks like Bubinga to me. Better hardwood scales, and they do include some scale tools, the tweezers in the front and the toothpick in the back. Now if you get a regular Swiss Champ, it's going to have the plus scale, so you're going to have the tweezers, toothpick, ink pen, and straight pen. You're going to have all that. But on the new wood ones, which are Victorinox's, what do they call it, sustainable Swiss walnut, they don't have any scale tools at all. So these older ones that are made out of a better hardwood, if this is Bubinga, and I'm pretty sure it is, sure looks like Bubinga. Here's another knife I have of my own that I made with Bubinga scales. And while the color's a little different, Bubinga will darken as you handle it, and I carry this knife a lot. This often starts off really red like that. Grain pattern sure looks the same. If it's not Bubinga, I would say it's rosewood. Either one are superior woods to make knife handles out of, other than the walnut, particularly the walnut that Victorinox uses these days. So they use this, and it just doesn't have any sheen to it. It actually looks like it's sapwood, not heartwood. So it's walnut, but it's new growth walnut, you can tell, and it's got a very dry, porous, lightweight feel to it. And I'll just tell you, it's very soft. I've dropped this knife a couple times and put huge dings, and I've had to sand and grind out, and it's just not a really that hard of a wood to make knife scales out of. And it's kind of porous, like I said, and kind of dull. I've actually oiled this knife and polished it several times, trying to give it a somewhat of a sheen and a less dry look, kind of seal it a little bit, but to not much avail. So anyway, I'm not a big fan of the Swiss walnut, the new growth walnut that Victorinox currently uses for their hardwood scales. And I honestly think for the price they charge for these wood-handled knives, they charge quite a premium, as you can see, as I mentioned, for the Swiss Champ, it's 107 for Celador and 144 for those wood scales. And you don't even get the scale tools. So I just think Victorinox could use, do better than that. I know they're trying to get something that's sustainable, environmentally friendly, but for heaven's sakes, there's still a lot of good exotic hardwoods out there that can be had without killing the environment. Buck does it with ebony, and so there's ways to do it. But anyway, I digress. This is the Swiss Champ. It is a 91 millimeter knife, obviously. It's 33 millimeters wide. And what does it weigh? I can't remember. I think I didn't weigh it. I'll put it up on the screen. But it's pretty chunky. It's supposed to have 33 functions and is built out of 64 different parts. So let's run through this knife. That should be entertaining, just to see me try to fumble through all of those different functions and not have a brain fart as to what they are. I left my fingernails long in order to do this, so let's get started. Right here on the front of the knife, first thing we have is the can opener with a small screwdriver, cap lifter, wire bender, half stop. Then we have the inline Phillips, which is a great tool. Nice half stop. Across from that, the magnifying glass. Now I think that's a glass lens inside a plastic housing. If so, that would date this knife after 2013. It originally had glass in a gray plastic housing, and then they went to all plastic. And then I think in 2013 they started putting glass back in the plastic housing. So I think that's what that is, but I'm not absolutely sure. We'll look at the tank stamp on the main blade here in a minute, and that'll give us an idea of the date as well. Okay, next up are the pleaters. That pivot needs a little oil, but there they are. And I don't know if that's got any kind of functionality in there, like I don't know, that's like a crimper or something like that. Next up, skizzers. Here's where it gets a little tricky for me. Next up, the fish scaler. So it's a fish scaler. You've got a measuring scale here and a hook disgorger. Next up, wood saw. No nail nick. Next up, metal saw and file. Stainless steel. And then finally, on the top, we have the small blade, small pen blade, and the large blade. And here is the tank stamp. It's Victorinox Swiss made stainless with the small V. So this is a tank stamp that Victorinox started using in 2011. So I think this knife was made somewhere after 2011, maybe after 2013, if that's a glass lens in the magnifying glass, and I think it is. And here on the back, Officier Swiss without the crossbow. By the way, this knife is new. I mean, it's used, but it's unused. You know what I mean? It's not brand new in the package, but this one obviously has no marks of use, just marks of maybe handling. Just pristine. Okay, so onto the back tools. We have the corkscrew with the mini screwdriver. And this is tricky. The small chisel, very small chisel. And we have a very fine screwdriver. And then there's the parcel hook. And finally, and that's a tough one, the reamer sewing eye, sharpened reamer with sewing eye. I think that's all the back tools. And then again, of course, we have tweezers in the front, toothpick in the back, and a key ring. Ta-da! I think I've just had one modern Swiss Champ before, and I customized it. I put Bocote wood scales on it, which looked a lot like these. This is a personal knife that I have. That's a Tinker. And I was able to get tweezers in this one, which was not easy. I had someone recently ask me if I still did custom work on Victorinoxes and Boker tech tools, and I had to respond, no, I'm not currently doing that. I mean, I never say never, but the reason I gave is that it's just really hard to compete when you completely hand make scales like this. It's really hard to compete on a time and cost basis with somebody that has a CNC router. They can set up their router and just crank out hundreds of these things once they're set up. And you usually see that with metal scales, aluminum, titanium, and everything. Not that many people do them with wood scales, but they could. And so the other reason too is that it does require so much time. And then if you want to sell the things, you can't price them ridiculously, so you really don't get paid for your time. And the other reason would be, I kind of hate to admit it, but as I get older, my eyesight's just not the same anymore, and my hands are just not as steady. So it's really hard to get the kind of accuracy that I would expect as a buyer. It's kind of hard to achieve that. I can still do it. The reason I didn't sell this one was that when I did the toothpick, I chipped out a little bit of the scale here. I'm sorry, when I did the tweezers, I chipped out a little bit of the scale, and kind of had to rebuild that a little bit. And so, I just didn't think that was perfect, so I kept it for myself. That's what Bocote looks like. I'll see if I can find a picture of that old Swiss champ I had in Bocote, because it was really great. I did it with a run of some other knives in Bocote. But yeah, that's just a look at a Swiss champ in the discontinued, I'm going to call them Bubinga scales with scale tools. Fantastic knife. It's a real showpiece. Thanks for watching, and have fun collecting.